Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Tony Dudzik, Pick Guardian.
Rob Chafe, Mad Cow Amplification.
Hey, everybody, it's me, Todd Novak. Welcome to the Guitar Knobs podcast. We're thrilled to death you're listening to our show. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, do we got a good one for you. We talked about this on a past couple shows. We did the NAMM recap, and one of our highlights was speaking with one of our guests, one of the two guests we have on, about something really, really special that they are making. Guests, will you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'll start. I'm Peter Margolis. I am co-author of Collecting Loud History with...
Hi, I'm Brian Ranks. I am a Marshall connoisseur and authorized repair guy for over 40 years.
Okay, so we got a few things we just want to chat about real quick. Tony, announcements?
No.
Rob?
Tony got a new dog.
Okay, Tony got a new dog.
Thanks for noticing.
Yes. All right, we're just gonna keep this rolling. We also want to be mindful of these two gentlemen's time. They took some time out of a very, very busy schedule.
Nice.
To
thanks for doing that.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we'll just get into what's going on in our music world this week, where we just check a little bit of tidbits of what's happening with ourselves. We're going to go around the horn here, starting off with Tanya Bolonsky, a.k.a. Tony,
Yes.
and then we're going to check in with Brian and Peter.
Okay, that sounds good. Is Rob going to do it too?
Maybe.
Okay.
If he's good.
Well, I am so excited because today from UPS, not in the mail, I got my Larson Artisan Woodwork, strangely enough, Bigsby pickups.
Yeah.
All the way from Canada, all the way from Manitoba in Canada.
Interesting.
And what even more exciting...
You could use those instead of like a couple of rolls of quarters if you get in a fight.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Bigsby-style pickups are similar to what Paul Bigsby would have made in the 1940s and 50s. And they are like a big hunk o' metal. There's like
the sound profile, is that like a P90 kind of thing?
It's a totally different profile. I mean, these meter out
bright. It's twangy.
It's more
boxy?
twangy. It's more twangy.
Yeah.
These meter out at 3.3, but they're still very loud pickups because they use very thick wire on the windings.
Uh-huh.
And the big concern I had was that these were going to make it here to the States before certain tariffs kicked in.
Right.
And luckily, there was some...
Under the radar.
Yeah. Well, they made it, and I've got them, and these are going to go in I'm going to make a kind of a Telly-style Bigsby.
Oh, fantastic.
So...
Very, very cool.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah. All right. Now, Brian, we know that you are mainly into the cabinetry and carpentry of things. Is there anything happening interesting or new in your music world?
Nothing super outrageous. I'm planning on possibly doing some fill-in tech work again with a couple of friends' bands. I'm kind of semi-retired from traveling the world these days, but I still do occasional substitution work.
Awesome. Well, that sounds fun. Anybody we might know of?
Well, REO Speedwagon, which is now known as the Kevin Cronin Band.
I mean, I've kind of heard of them a little bit.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
I've been associated with them on and off since 1987.
Wow. Very, very cool. That's that's a nice little update for a week, I suppose. Peter, how about yourself?
Well, I am not an expert guitar tech like Brian is. I work in the television production business, and I'm currently working on a show called the iHeart Radio Music Awards, which is live on Fox next Monday.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And I was on a Zoom all day production meeting, and I'm down at the venue tomorrow. We start rehearsing Saturday all day Sunday, and Monday morning rehearsals, and we go live Monday night.
Yes, my band will be down there too, so we'll see you on set.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He'll be in the back of the cop car.
That's super cool.
I'm friends with
besides
Dave Grohl.
Marshall.
Let me in.
That's my other world besides taking care of a large Marshall collection.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, that sounds like a very, very busy world.
Yeah,
And,
no stress there at all.
been talking all day, so
No.
we just want one more hour of talking, and you're maybe done.
You guys there's no limit.
Okay.
As long as you need us.
Fantastic. For me, I've been hammered.
What about you, Todd?
Thanks, Tony. I've been hammered by, we get into things with, Instagram ads and stuff like that. And in particular, I've looked at this one long enough. I'm like, I should just do it. Probably about 100 times. Well, I finally did it.
What'd you do?
I got the series of books by Jeffrey Kund.
I have seen this.
Or Kunde, I don't know how to say his last name, but it's the Progressions Classics. And it's the dude sitting there with the Gretsch that sounds amazing. And he's like, hey, cowboy chords are boring. Try this. And I just thought, what the heck? Why not? Well, that would be great to share with the listeners, like what to expect from it. Pretty cheap, all things considered. And it's 3 books of every possible chord you could play, I guess. I got to dig into it a little bit. It's 3 little books, the classics V1, V2, and V3. I'm sure probably a lot of you have seen the ads for this if you're into guitars at all.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was like $35. And I'm like, that's great. Why not? If nothing else, if I get into a rut, I can just go, you know what? I'm just going to open a page and try a couple of these out and see what sounds good. And maybe it'll spark interest and that'll keep me fresh and loose and all that good stuff.
Now, when are you going to learn cowboy chords?
That's next on my list. Yeah.
Years ago, there were a series of books called Chord Chemistry books by Ted Green. And man, you want to talk about every chord that you could possibly imagine. He was an amazing player. Unfortunately, he recorded 1 record. He's no longer with us. But if you want to get into the weeds and look up some YouTube clips of Ted Green, was Ted Green, one of the most incredible guitar players I've ever seen.
Well, we will have to check that out for sure. If you can't figure out where these things are coming from, ladies and gentlemen, this is actually from the Guitar Institute, LLC. So, via Jeffrey Kund. So, pretty cool stuff. Pretty fun. I'm kind of looking forward to it. And it's also they give you the digital download. So, you can just have your computer open and scan through it and stuff if you don't want to mess around with the book. But you get both. Pretty cool. Pretty good stuff. All right. I've already talked to these gentlemen a little bit, and we're going to forego our usual 4 on the floor and get to the good stuff because we have a lot to talk about. This is a really, really big thing that these guys are doing, which we haven't really tipped off yet. I can set that up just briefly, but when we were at the show, we got turned on to, actually from the guys at Digitech. They said, hey, you got to go talk to Brian Ranks over at the Marshall booth because he's putting together this book that is no one has ever seen anything like this. It's about this giant collection of Marshalls. It's 600 pages. And I was like, wow, okay. So I actually went over to the Marshall booth, stood around. I was like, well, I don't know who to talk to here. I'll talk to this gentleman. He looks happy. And I talked to him, and I was just talking, and then I kind of looked down, and he had a shirt, and it said Brian. I'm like, it can't be. And I was like, your last name Ranks? And he's like, yeah. So here you guys are. Without further ado, I know that you guys will tell us all about this without any more of my nonsense. Take it away, guys. Tell us what's going on.
Let me start it, and then I'll turn it over to Brian because there's some stuff very specific to his interests, and there's some to mine. Fortunately, we are in many ways polar opposites of each other, which makes for a great team because I don't step on his toes and he doesn't step on mine, and we both bring something to the party very different from each other. I went to UCLA as a creative writing major and then became a film major and went off into work in television. Prior to that, I was a performer and I played in hard rock heavy metal bands on the Sunset Strip during the heyday. When all the hair bands were coming up and, getting signed, and I was in a band and we were one of them. And our band was managed by Vicki Hamilton when she had, our Guns N' Roses and all her whole thing. So I come to this as a former player, and I got out of it just in time for me when things started to turn a little bit, and I realized that I just didn't want to end up broke or dead or working at Guitar Center. I got out of it, but the collecting of guitars and collecting of Marshalls never went away. Just my desire to be a rock star. I enjoyed being behind the camera more. And so I started this collection. I mean, I used a lot of Marshalls when I was a performer, and rather than sell them and completely get out of it, I put them in storage. And as I started to make money and have a career, I didn't know anything about investing or the stock market or, saving money or doing anything, but I knew that these things, being that they were essentially handmade, the ones that I loved, and there was a finite amount of them, would be worth something. So I started stockpiling them. And by the time I met Brian, which was 1994, I had amassed about 20 cabinets and 20 heads. And they were in a guest house in my house in Studio City, and the Northridge earthquake came along, and my guest house imploded, and all the Marshalls fell on top of each other, on top of all the vintage guitars and everything else. And I had a disaster and didn't know what to do about it. So the only person I knew that dealt with anything was the guy who would fix my stuff internally, and that was Bob Bradshaw, who was also a big pedal board builder. And so I went to Bob and I said, well, I've got this gigantic pile of rubble that was once my Marshall collection, and I have, broken logos and torn grills and ruined speakers. And he said, well, you got to meet the guy down the way because that's all he does. And he gave me Brian's number. And I remember, I was driving, I'd been coming from a job like in the South Bay, and I had about an hour. And I called Brian and spoke to him the entire way home and, sort of tried to tell him what I had. But at the time, I didn't really know. I mean, I knew they said Marshall, and I knew, they were kind of old, but I didn't know really what they were. And of course, Brian knew everything about these things down to, how many threads are in every screw in the boxes. And I realized that, I found my muse, and that was the beginning of our friendship. And Brian took the first piece that I had, which I spray painted white to make matters worse for the band. So not only did he have to, fix the grill and fix the logo and fix everything else, he had to take all the white paint off. But it was such a valuable piece that we didn't want to recover it. So he literally, with a rag and a toothbrush and, some chemicals and days and days and days and days, got all of the paint off of this thing and restored it to its original red luster. And we realized, that we were sort of onto something. And that's how our journey began. And those, 20 plus Marshall heads and cabinets have turned into, literally, I don't know what, Brian, 400, some odd 500, and adding to your collection.
All of us guys, yeah, we have, I don't know, it's a couple
600-ish.
A couple hundred 412s and close to that many heads, and a lot of combos, things too.
It's a lot, and it was the pursuit was initially well, I have a red one in this model, I should have a white one. well, I have a white one now. I really should have a purple one. And so
Don't
that
forget the
was
snakeskin.
how it started. Well, the snakeskin is not vintage. And we're very true to what Marshall produced. So, we have all the old catalogs so we could actually see what they made when they made it. A lot of that information is available in Michael Doyle's, History of Marshall books. But it was like, well, I need to get one. And then it's, okay, I've got all the colors in the basket weave, but I don't have them in the large checkerboard. And now I need them in the small checkerboard. And I don't have the black grill, the purple, and it just went on and on and on like that. And the great thing about working with Brian is he's been an authorized Marshall restoration person that Marshall themselves send clients to that they can't service. And he was able to acquire the things that other people just weren't. So we had a lot of the parts available to us, and what wasn't available to us, we would either hunt down on the internet. Pre-internet, we would do what everybody else did, look through the recycler and look through, things like this. And a lot of things we've had made along the way that we couldn't get. And so, we would buy these cabinets that you otherwise, or heads that you otherwise wouldn't touch because it was, the Tolex was peeled off, or it had no logo, or it was missing, knobs, or the power cord was changed, or the speakers were all wrong, or, whatever. These things were in various states of disrepair. And we would acquire them knowing that we could literally bring them back to life. So that was sort of the genesis of what we were doing. And then along the way, about 10 years ago, when we were in the midst of this and both of us acquiring a lot of Marshalls, we sort of said, we really should write this down one day because, we've had our hands, Brian more so than me, but we've had our hands in so many of these. And Brian said, well, I've kept copious records. And I said, well, I have all my receipts from everything I've ever bought. And we just talked about it and said, one of these days. And around 2018, we looked at each other and said, we ain't getting any younger. And we need to do this because if we don't document what we have learned, in our time doing this information is going to die with us. Mm-hmm. And basically the information was what we learned along the way in all these massive restoration projects that we did and hunting down these, museum quality pieces that we would find. And we were also, we were benefited by Brian's career, which was as a guitar tech on all these massive tours. And he was first in line when, somebody would say, hey, you know what? I'm not digging these old Marshalls. I want to, move to boogies or I want to move to something else. And Brian was like right there. And he goes, well, I know just the place for him. And so we acquired a lot of stuff like that. And then he and I made a couple of incredible connections about a decade ago where our collections really turned for both of us when we met a couple of people. And we talk about it a lot in the book. I don't want to give everything away, but the culmination of this is we just decided that we needed to write all of this down. And, originally Brian was like, well, I just want to do sort of a parts catalog and to talk about all the parts. And I said, if we do it, we're going to appeal to the 10 people that want to read a parts catalog. We need to make this thing gorgeous, and it's got to really be photographed incredibly well. And it's got to be photographed outside in nature. And it's got to be, we have to, see the underbelly of these things. We have to expose everything that we have done to them and see the underside of all the chassis and the backside of the cabinets and inside the cabinets and into the cones. And we had jigs made up so that we could shoot this properly. And so we spent 17 days with an army of people shooting my collection, some of Brian's collection, and a couple of pieces that we borrowed that neither of us had in our collection. And then we hired this amazing graphic artist, book designer, who really deserves all the props to that. He was the guy that made this thing come alive, because we just provided him photographs and text and, everything. And he was the one that put it all on the page and made this book look like it looks. And it really, and Brian and I have said this, it's really an art piece. It's not a book. There's nothing like it. There's nobody that looks at this thing is going to say, oh yeah, this looks like, whatever, the Vox book. No, it doesn't. It doesn't look like anything that's ever been done before, because it is a 7-pound piece of art. Mm. So there you have it. There's the short answer to your question.
All right. Well, everything's done, I guess.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Really cool.
No, I think, and honestly, I think Brian should pick it up from here, because there's a whole section in the back of the book that was really his baby. And it's one of the things that separates this book from everything else. So I'm going to let him talk about this.
Well, first off, I believe after the introduction, I owe my friend Kevin Drury at Digitech a big shout out and a thank you for telling Todd to come look me up, for crying out loud.
Exactly.
Kevin's good people, man.
Yeah, he was great.
I owe him huge for that. But Kevin, as I'm sure you're aware, was formerly, for many years, he worked for U.S. Music, who was the distributor of Marshall products in America. And he was one of my artist relations liaisons for odds and ends that are unobtainable and hard to find. So, but I started in the Marshall game. I've been a touring guitar tech for 40 years, since about 79 or 80, and traveling around and working with various musicians. In between things, I was working on Marshall cabinets and heads and trying to recover them. And in the mid 80s, I was introduced to Jim Marshall, and he was showing some of the stuff that I'd done, and a relationship blossomed, and I became an authorized restorer for Marshall, kind of on a little side thing through the artist relations program. I don't do any of the electronics work, although I can change switches and jacks and things like that. But I leave most of the electronics work to people that do that every day. And in between touring and stuff like that, I was always tearing apart and completely disassembling and repairing Marshall head boxes, combo boxes, the 412 cabinets, and what have you, and trying to put them back into proper working order again. And because of my relationships, I was able to get a lot of items that ordinary folks were not aware existed. So I was able to get Tolexes and different grills and hardware parts and things like that over the years. When I first started doing stuff, Unicord was the distributor in America for all Marshall products. And right shortly after I came aboard, Unicord went away and was taken over by Korg to distribute all the Marshall products in America. And so my relations kind of went through Korg on Long Island. They had the same building as Unicord did. And then after a number of years, Korg morphed into Korg USA and continued the Marshall distributorship and so forth. And that's where all my parts and pieces would go through, from England to there to me. And then after a period of time, Korg USA was no longer the distributor in America. It went to U.S. Music. And that's where I met Kevin Drury. He was one of the new guys that had come along with them. But I've been very fortunate. When I need certain things, I have been able to get hold of those things. And my relationship with Marshall is kind of acting as a West Coast custom shop, although very clandestine. My priorities were the Marshall endorsees, a few big name pro players, and a couple of large collectors such as Peter. And I've been very fortunate over the years to be involved with helping people resurrect some pretty rough shaped items. For total restorations from the ground up, taking stuff down to bare wood, I'm probably well into the 800s at this point. You figure 40 years times. In the early years, I used to do about 25 a year. Nowadays, I probably do about 20 per year, but you average that out over 40 years. And yeah, you're well into the 800s. And then on top of that, I've done a myriad of just grill changes for people, or somebody comes in and the plastic hardware on their cabinet is brittle and busting off, and I've replaced that sort of stuff, or broken handles or jacks or what have you, or rewiring speaker cabinets for them. But I've had my hands in literally, I can't even begin to guess how many cabinets and heads and stuff that I've had apart in my lifetime. But it's what I do all the time. When I'm not traveling as a guitar technician, I work on Marshalls pretty much every day.
That is, it's one of those stories when you hear somebody that kind of found the thing that they do really well and get to do it every day, and it's different every day somehow. That's like a dream for most people.
I decided
Yep.
years and years ago that I didn't want to be involved in doing other brands of equipment and so forth. I just settled in with the Marshall brand, and because I loved it, and I started enjoying it, and I decided I just want to concentrate on trying to do as good as or better than factory work on those products.
That's cool.
And to let me just say one thing. And to that end, if you look at Brian's work and then you look at anything else that you've ever seen that's been repaired or, ground up restoration or recovered, there's no comparison, because one of the things that, he does and that, he and I have gone after is, how were these things made when they were made? So we don't want to just grab a staple gun and staple the new piece of vinyl back on. We don't want to just go down to the hardware store and get, whatever the glue is that they use. We actually have the staples and the staple gun that were used in the 60s at Marshall. We have the correct glue that they use. We can't get it in California because it doesn't pass OSHA standards. We have to actually go out of state to get it. We have the tap and die set that they use for their specific screws that, attach the speakers to the speaker board or the handles to the, the cabinet. So it's really to the nth degree. And, it's like any great auto restoration place. When you have something like a Ferrari, that you need special tools and special parts and special knowledge to bring this thing back. If you're going to take a wrecked Ferrari and restore it and bring it to a, Concours d'Elegance, and you want this thing, to show well, it has to be done exactly like it was done down to the last weld at the factory. And that's the way that Brian treats his pieces that he works on. So when you get it back, this is what it looked like when it rolled off the factory line.
That is commitment. Rob, you got a question?
Yeah, I got a question. You guys were talking about the focusing on the vintage Marshall stuff. So I assume you start from day one. Does this book go through the 70s, 80s, all the way to the end? Did you mention even current stuff?
Yeah, so this is how it's laid out. The beginning of the book is there's a table of contents, there's a forward, there's a dedication, and then it gets into my story, my history, and Brian's history, how we met, which is the story I told you over the '94 earthquake. And it sort of tells the reader, who I am, who he is, how we met, and then it goes into a chapter that's called Disclaimer. which I felt that we needed to write because people are going to look at these things and go, oh my God, I've never seen anything that looks like this. How did these guys get these pieces? Well, in fact, we're old enough to have bought them when they came out. I mean, literally, Brian and I bought 70s and 80s Marshalls in the 70s and 80s and kept them in boxes and kept them in our garage and in storage units. So when you look at them, you're looking at a 50-year-old, museum piece that's a time capsule. And there's the other pieces that came to us in various states of disrepair that we put back together that look like museum pieces. So in this chapter, we talk about exactly what we've done. So nobody can say, oh, look at that thing's been recovered, or that's got a grill, or they changed the logo out, or look, because we're wide open about it. There's no pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. Many of these pieces are exactly how they came off the factory, and many of them are ground up restorations to make them exactly as they came off the factory. And then in every one, we talk about what it was and what we did to it. So the first chapter of the book is 1964, which was their second year of production. And 1963 is an offset logo head and cabinet. There's very, very, very few of originals that were ever made, and they're impossible to find, and the prices are insane. My first piece of my collection is 64. And so that's where we start. And we talk a little in each chapter about what was going on in the world in 1964 to try to give people an idea of, what was 1964? Well, it was, the Beatles on set, Ed Sullivan. It was the United States recovering from, the death of JFK. It was, here's what the world was, what was happening musically in the world, and then what was happening at Marshall. And that's how we start every chapter. And then once we get through that information, we show the pieces that we have from those years. And if it's a head, we show the front, the back, the top, the bottom, the sides, the back off, the chassis out, the top of the chassis, the bottom. And then we show specific things of interest of that piece. And then we talk about where did it come from? How did we get it? How long have we had it? Then we go to 65 and 6 and so on and so forth. And we do that for every year up through 1980.
Wow.
Brian and I both have pieces after 1980, but not a significant amount like we do from 64 to 80. I have a couple of JCM 800s. Brian's got a couple, JCM 800s and 900s, but it's not the bulk of our collection. So what we did with those pieces is we have a section after 1980. It's called Honorable Mention, where we talk about the things that we have and we photograph, combos from 1983. And, we have Hendrix stacks that are reissues, and we have, power brakes, and we have other things that, didn't fall in the 64 to 80 window necessarily. And then we have, after Honorable Mention, we have another section of, because we took so many photos, we have a section of just some of the photos that didn't get used in the bulk of the book. And then there's a massive parts section after 1980, which talks about every single thing that went into the making of these amps and cabinets, other than, things like capacitors and transformers and diodes. But it's all the screws and bolts and rivets and washers, and when did things change? When did the logo change, and why? When did they start using plastic parts, and why? And things like that. That's really Brian's baby. And so you've never seen a part section in any book like this. And it also helps the reader understand, what they have. One of the main focuses of this book is Brian and I would go through, we'd look at Craigslist, and then we go, well, there's another guy selling something. He has no idea what it is. Well, do we take advantage of him and go, hey, we'll give you $200 for this $2,000 cabinet you're selling because you don't know what you're doing? Or do we educate him? So now there actually is a book where somebody can go, I'm not sure what I have. It's got a checkerboard, but is it a 71 or is it a 73? How do I tell? I don't know what kind of speakers. How do I date them? Well, this book tells you. So there's no mystery left when because to the untrained eye, you look at a Marshall and it's like, oh, there's a Marshall. Well, okay, what is it?
Right.
How do I tell what it is? What year? What month? What day was it made? And if you read our book, all of that's in there.
You mentioned museum pieces a couple times, and what struck me, even just thumbing through the prototype, which I can't believe someone didn't abscond with, although Brian was watching it like a hawk.
Yeah, they caught me before I got out of the
both
booth.
of us were. But trust me, we made 6 of them, and we had 2 of them at the Marshall booth, and it was either one of us never left, even to go to the bathroom to go get something to eat, because that's all that exists of these things. Mm-hmm. Because when we were invited to Marshall, and they said, "Hey, we want you to be a part of this," we didn't have a book. We had PDFs. There was no printer. We had nothing, and we had 3 weeks to pull this together.
Jeez.
Wow.
So. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm sorry you had asked a question about museum pieces.
Yeah, you were talking. You were kind of referencing museum pieces, and the thing that dawned on me that I think is really really special about what you guys are doing, and the glimpses that I've seen thumbing through it, and what you have on the website. Which, by the way, everybody go to collectingloudhistory.com. And you can start checking this out. We'll tell you about how you can get in on the ground floor of this really soon. But the difference between seeing, like, oh, why wouldn't you just make a big museum out of this? And it's like when you start thumbing through the pages, you get a real quick understanding of why that would just not be very exciting. Because you've dedicated all these pages to every single possible view and detail and explosion, and there's no way that you could experience this other than by the way that you guys have done it. So,
correct.
Great service to not only these pieces, but also to the guitar community, because nobody's been able to experience this kind of thing in this manner.
And also, well, Brian and I have talked about this. If you're an amp repair tech, and Brian and I have a guy that we use exclusively in Los Angeles, I wouldn't let anybody else, and no offense to amp techs, but, I've been with the same guy for, decades. He doesn't have these drawings. He doesn't have these photographs specifically of all these models and all these versions, just from 1967 alone, all the variations, or from 73 or 76 of all the different variations they did. So to a guy like that, who somebody brings in an amp, it's like, oh, you know what? This is a 76. Let me go through this book and find one that matches this one that Peter and Brian have. And let me see what's been changed, because a lot of, our pieces are bone stock.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to see what was in there originally, well, go to the page where that amp is and look at the circuit board, and they're like, oh, there it is. There's the shot. That's what I need.
You mentioned all the variations, and obviously you've got 600 some odd pages worth of variations. Why do you think there were so many variations? As just somebody who's like, we've had a couple shows on Marshalls, and I'm sitting there, and pretty soon my jaw, I'm mouth breathing, and there's drool because I'm like, why is there so much variation?
Well, I'm sure, Brian and I probably differ in our opinions, and I'm sure that people differ from us. And I think initially, when they were making the JTM 45s, and they were, it's said that they copied the Fender Bassman initially, and went from there. But he was doing this out of his garage, and they were making them one at a time, and they were handing them off to people like Jeff Beck, and and they would say, well, I want a little more of this. I need it louder. I need it to do this. So they'd go back and go, maybe if we added a transformer here, and if we put another gain stage here. And So there was a lot of that in the beginning. And then, beyond that, I mean, Brian could probably speak to this, better than I can.
Well, Marshalls in the early days, the first several years of the company, were all either individually made or small batch made. They didn't, like a normal company, make a bunch of stuff and put them on the shelf and wait for somebody to come along and buy them. They only built them when somebody ordered one. And so, as the first few years went along, as it started getting into the mid 60s, your batches were more like, they'll build a half a dozen or 10 of a particular JTM 45 or a 50 watt, and then they build 10 100-watt leads, and then 10 bass amps, and then a few 50-watt PAs and a few 100-watt PAs, and then they finally get around to going back again to build another small batch of 50 watters. And when that time rolls around, a particular transformer isn't available from the place at Radio Spares, so we'll substitute something that'll do the job, but it's slightly different, or a different light indicator in the front panel, or a switch, or something like this. They built stuff by what they could get for parts, and they did not buy like large quantities of parts at a time. And so you have
they weren't
amplifiers.
Yeah, they weren't mass producing them. So, I mean, I can speak a little bit to this. My father was an inventor, and he invented something in 1971 that changed the security business, put it completely on its head, and formed this company. And then during the summers between college, I would go and work for him, and I trained to be a purchasing agent. And so I was buying electronic parts for these things that he was making, and I would call the manufacturer that we would get the capacitors or the diodes or, the resistors from, and they would say, oh, we're out of this brand, but we're going to substitute it with this one. And so, if you looked at my dad's stuff from month to month, it looked different inside. And, they may be the same value, or they may have been a military spec versus a non-military spec, but it just looked different because in the beginning, before his company exploded, it was like, we got to get these products out. We got to get them out the door. We have orders. We got to build them and ship them. So in the case of Marshall, it was the same. It's like, we've got guys waiting for these things. Just run down to the store and get whatever we can get to get this up and running. So a lot of the circuitry that you see back in the day, all these variations where it's like, we just got to get it out the door.
Yeah, I'll say this much.
There you go.
All the stuff I've seen come through the years, 800 series was really the first time. 1-800 was the same as the next 800, the same as the next, for long periods of time.
Well, yeah. Well, by then you have a 20,000 square foot building with 30 people soldering circuit boards, and my father's company was the same thing. Mm-hmm. When he started out, it was 3 people, and by the time he sold it, it was 300. And then yes, you get into a production situation where everything is identical because you can order 500 transformers; they come on pallets, and you can put those large orders in. But when you're a young company working out of your garage or your back room, and you're just, you got something that people want, you just want to get it done and not make people wait.
Even at the late 70s, they were still kind of all over the place, like especially 78, 79. I'll have one come in with a transformer with the B plus below 400, and then one that's, 20 units later come in and the B plus is a 460, and they're both original transformers. Mm-hmm. So they'd be kind of all over the place.
It's part of the beauty of it, and it's one of the things that Brian and I love so much about this brand. And I even, not to throw names around, but I spent a good amount of time talking to the CEO of Marshall on the phone the other week, and he said, "So why us? Why our brand? What's the attraction?" And I said, "Well, no two are alike." Mm-hmm. And really, they aren't. And there was a time when, I had 20 or 30 of them, and you could put a blindfold on me and, stick it in a different input with the same cabinet. And I can tell you, I could have told you every single one. Mm-hmm. They were just voiced so differently. And, a lot of it is what tubes are in it. And, anybody will tell you that, the first preamp tube, plays a large role in it. But beyond that, they all had different voices. They were like people, they had personalities. And, as they got later in the years, yes, around the 800s and the 900s and so on and so forth, it became standardized, and one sounded the same as the next. But back in the 60s and 70s, no way. And that was, one of the things that, it's like, why did Eddie Van Halen sound so different than everybody else? Well, a lot of ingredients went into that, but one of the main ingredients was he had a head that did not sound like the head next to it when it came off the production line or the one before it. Mm-hmm. And there are some of them that are magic, and I have a few. And you plug into them and just go, holy shit. And then you plug into the next one and go, and, they look great, but there's a few of them that whatever the chemistry is, they are wildly unique and great.
Yep, for sure.
When you're talking about these all as, historically correct and everything, do you have a section in here that is dedicated to like some of the custom models that may have come along for individuals or anything, or are you mainly focusing on not that?
Well, we're not really focusing on that. I can speak to some of that. A lot of people don't realize it, but going clear back to even in the late 60s, Marshall has always kind of had a custom shop in England. And somebody over here in the States would just think that whatever their music store had in the showroom or was able to get for them was all that there was. But, if you knew the right, place, or you knew how to put in a special order at Marshall, you could get stuff done in colors. And certain artists over the years, a lot of artists would come along and go, I like this, but can you build me a special batch that looks a little different, or I want mine in a certain color? And they would do that. Or an artist would come along and go, the new cabinets that are being made, let's say it was 1971, the new cabinets that are being made have the large check grill in them, but I bought 3 or 4 cabinets a couple years ago that have the basket weave grill. Will you make me a couple of custom color or a custom cabinet with the older grill to match what I already have purchased? And if you knew who to talk to, or you were in the right circles, they made that kind of stuff happen. And today you find in the vintage market, every once in a while you'll find an anomaly that just doesn't fit in, that's an oddball for that particular year cosmetically in some way. And generally speaking, it usually comes down to it was made for a particular person to match something, or somebody wanted to try something out for a different look for a particular tour or band. And, 30 years later, after the 5th or 6th owner, nobody knows how it got to be that way.
There's a cabinet that I acquired a couple years ago. And I said, Brian, you got to see this one. This one is unbelievably clean. And so the next time he came down, he looked at it and he said, I'm stumped, because in the thousands of cabinets I've seen, I've never seen this. And it's one that had appointments from 69 and 70 and 71. And it was untouched. And, we realized that it's just, somebody must have said, I want it with this grill, this logo, these speakers, and it had to have been one that was ordered that way, because there's no way that production points to a cabinet that spanned over 3 years. But you can look at every single screw and every solder joint and everything, and it was absolutely untouched.
Maybe they were cleaning out the parts bin at the end of the year.
Yeah, obviously we don't know. We weren't there, and you can just, you look at it and you go, okay, I know enough about this to know that this serial number tag should not have been on this, but these staples are original, and the vinyl's original, and it's like, and it wasn't a back cover that was taken off of anything because we've tried that and holes don't line up, and so it defied logic. But it's the
Are
real
you guys
thing.
aware at all of the Rose Morris situation with Jim Marshall?
I was just going to ask if you guys did any of that stuff, like
Well,
focus on those models.
here's one of the things. Rose Morris had the distributorship locked up for Jim for a number of years and a whole bunch of markets. During that time, there was also some markets around Europe, especially that. Rose Morris didn't sell anything in those markets, and there were music stores and or individuals in those markets that wanted Jim's products, and he legally could not sell them because of his deal with Rose Morris. Excuse me. So, hence the kitchen Marshalls, the Narbs, the brands, all those kind of things. But what tended to happen a lot of times is they would be doing a production run of normal products down the line, and maybe they've got a few odds and ends left over from the last year in January or February. Well, they use up those particular hardware items or something like that, serial number tags that are a little different, and use up the leftover pieces, and they go to, like, let's say some music store chain in Belgium that only ordered 20 pieces a gear. It helps Marshall use up some pieces that they've got. It got around the Rose Morris thing, and those things were slightly different than what was normally coming off the production line.
Do you have any of that any NARBs or anything like that in the book or outlined in the book or in a section of the book? Or?
I don't have a NARB. I have a kitchen Marshall piece. I have what Brian and I think is probably the strangest of all of them. And it's called the Big M. And it's not the one that was, made in the 70s with the big M in the corner. It actually, the plaque is where it's a JTM 45. The plaque goes where the script logo would go. And it says the Big M on it. And apparently, according to lore, it was made for the German market because there was a company in Germany, Marshall, and Jim Marshall could not sell his products there because there was a conflict of interest. So he had to change the name of his product. So he called it the Big M, had some plates made with, to sit on where the script logo would be, and it was called the Big M. I've only seen one or maybe one in a book, plus the one that I own. And so that's probably the strangest of the strange for me. And so that is on the cover of the book, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of unique ones, I think I'm dying to know what would each of you, and maybe hopefully it's a different answer. I kind of like the idea of it being a different answer. What is the Holy Grail?
Oh, that's they're very easy for me. I'll tell it fast, and then Brian can give his answer. One of them, let me give you three. One of them would be the Big M because it's so unbelievably rare. However, when I got it, I plugged it in, I played one chord, and it died. And I went, oh, my God. And so I took it down to our tech, and he sat with it for about an hour and could not figure it out. And then finally, he touched one of the parts and said, this shouldn't be warm. And figured it out and changed the part out. And, I pointed out in the book, actually, there's a big circle around it because it's a non-original part. That would be one of them. The second one would be I have 3 Black Flag heads, 250s and 100. Black Flags were made in a very short window in late 1967. They're very rare. And I have one of the 100s the 100 Black Flag I have was acquired from a well-known celebrity player who used it on a very successful album. It is an unbelievable sounding head. And lastly, the third would be the JTM 45-100. So the JTM 45-100s, there's a couple different versions of them, but there are so few. It's the first head that was made in the standard box. And they were typically made back then for players that requested them. You know, Hendrix used that head, and the Who used them, and the Kinks used them. And anyway, if you have a JTM 45-100, it more than likely belonged to some, you know, band or some player back in 1967. This one that I have came from the Kinks. And how it ended up at the dealer where I bought it from, I don't know. But it typically with JTM 45-100s, because of the chassis and the material that was used for the chassis, they bend often, and they have a curve to them. If anybody's ever worked on one, you'll notice that the weight of the transformers and this material, they tend to bend. This one is perfect, and it's in amazing condition, and it's all original. So I would say the answer, the Holy Grail, is the 67 Black Flag 100 watt, the JTM 45-100, and the Big M.
All
Those
right.
three.
Brian?
Well,
Brian.
Pete listed a couple of good ones. I concur with the JTM 45-100 because they probably only made maybe 3 dozen of them that are legitimate ones or whatever until they actually got the correct panels to have the panel on the front that didn't have the JTM 45 over in the corner of it. Other than that, the first early 60 or 6 100 watt PA heads are pretty spectacular pieces to own. They work pretty darn good for guitar. Let's see, another one that's really rare that you see in the catalogs. None of us have any. None of my friends have any. But in the 67, 8, and 69 catalogs, you'll notice that they had what they called an organ setup. Marshall sold a 50 watt instead of a 50 watt lead or bass head. It was a 50 watt organ head, and it was just the same exact amplifier, just slightly voiced differently, to lend itself to people, you know, somehow running a Wurlitzer or a B3 organ out into a Marshall half stack in those days. And although they advertised them, they made a few of them. I have never really seen one in person other than in those ads from the 60s. How many they made voiced for organ, I don't know. My suspicion is that because just like a bass head and a lead head, a small handful of resistors and caps can change one into the other, and Marshall did lots of swapping back and forth at the factory themselves that way. It wouldn't surprise me if most of the original organ amplifiers were eventually changed over to be voiced like a regular 1987 lead head. So that's why you don't find any of them.
Super cool.
Going back, I want to say something about the JTM 45-100 that I acquired, and Brian can concur with this. We were well into the production of this book, and neither of us owned this piece of gear, and we were like, you know, if only. We're really missing this. We don't even know anybody that owns one to borrow it, to put it in the book. And it literally, I don't want to say fell out of the sky, but we were done photographing this book. And I got a call saying, "You're never going to believe what I found." We were literally in the last phases of production of this book where all the chapters were done. And, you know, we were getting into, you know, some of the editing, and now all of a sudden this head appears and we have to go back and find a photographer and, figure out how do we weave this into the book. And magically, that happened with the JTM 45-100. It's literally the last piece of gear that went into this book, and it's sort of the showpiece of the book, really.
Well, speaking of this book you keep referencing, we want to make sure that people understand how they can get their hands on it and why they should be some of the first to get their hands on it.
Well, that's an awesome question, and part of why we wanted to do this not only was to get all this knowledge out and to be on your podcast, but to talk about this. It's a big ask to say to somebody, hey, you need to spend $150 on this book you're not going to get into your hands for 3 months. And we're aware of that. And, I am here to tell you, and Brian will agree, there's zero profit margin in this book for us. Zero. Each one of these books costs well over $100 to produce. And by the time we end up, getting them to paying for the delivery and getting them on pallets and boxing them and putting all the packing materials in it and the labels and driving them to the post office, it's almost a losing situation for us. In order to be able just to pay the printer for these books, it's over $100,000. Oh. So I know. Trust me, I've written the check. So
my sphincter
we didn't
concurs.
have a choice. we literally. I mean, I said to Brian when I wrote the first third, I said I've never written a check this size.
The first third of a check.
Yeah, I mean, we're writing $40,000 checks. Yeah, so we're paying in pieces, and I just said to Brian, my hand was shaking. So, but it just to print a book this size, it's literally 596 pages. It's 7 pounds. It's got a hardcover. It's not only is the printing because of the type of paper that we used and the bond and the texture and the gloss and all that. But the binding of trying to keep a book this size together, once it's done being printed, it then goes off on pallets to a bindery, and they actually put the book together. Then it goes back to the printer while they've made the cover, which, the picture on the cover is embossed, and, they then have to glue the cover into the book. I mean, it's a crazy process. It takes a long time. And I mean, even today I was on with the printer because I was there for the last couple days, rereading last minute stuff, making last minute changes. And I called Brian, I go, you're not going to believe this. We've read this thing 7 times. Would you believe that I wrote this? And I read it to him. And he goes, how did we not get it? So, and the printer was literally going back to the PDF and making fixes today, and the machines are running tomorrow. So back to your point, just to be able to afford to do something like this, we've had to ask people, hey, I know this is a lot of money, and I know you're not going to see, we don't even get them until May 15th, and then you're going to get them a week or 2 later. But, trust us. There's nothing else like this. And to prove a point, there are several books like this, one of which I was very involved with, which is a book about Randy Rhoads. And that book had one print run. There were 2,500 that were printed. They were sold for $100. You can't find them on the internet for under $800-900. There's another book about a famous car, and I was, big into these cars for a while. They're called Sunbeam Tigers. Oh, yeah. And there was a book written about them. It's called the Book of Norman. They were printed once. I have a copy of this, and I thought, well, one day I should probably part with this. I looked on eBay. The last one sold for $3,600.
Wow.
So these big collectible coffee table books, if they're printed correctly and attention is paid to them and they're not just thrown together, but they're really cared for, these are art pieces. They're collector's items. They're going to be well worth over what we're asking people to pay for them, which is literally break even for us.
Wow.
So anyway, that's, what I want to say about the book. You go to collectingloudhistory.com, you put your order in. You can also order T-shirts that our web designer drew that are really cool. And the minute we get the books, we're signing the first 200, and we're setting up shop in my house. And Brian and I and our web designer and our book designer, literally like the grassroots organization that we are, we're going to pack every one of these by hand, take them down to the post office, send everyone out. And, we want this information to get into the hands of people. We have spent our entire adult lives doing this. And, we want to share our knowledge with people. And we want people that enjoy martials as much as we do to have this.
And I just ordered my copy. So when you
thank you.
see Anthony Dudzik come through.
Todd,
You know what?
have you ordered yours yet? What?
It just came up on my phone.
Oh.
So thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, every time we get an order, it pops up.
I'm a big guitar and amp book collector because that's really what I can afford.
Yeah.
And I mean, this one, when Todd came back from the show just beaming, saying, "Oh my God, you have to see this, and it's going to be leather bound, and this is going to be, and so
Leather-ish.
Ish.
I was corrected yesterday.
No cows were harmed in the production of this book.
Honestly, I can tell you, and Brian, will second this. It way exceeded our expectations, and when we, and our book designer Denny Anderson, who designed the Randy Rhoads book, he was a graphic artist at Universal for years. He did tons of DVD covers and tons of things. And I said to Brian, and he will back me up on this, when we talked about doing this book, I said, if Denny doesn't get involved and doesn't design this book, I don't want to do it because I know what it's going to look like. And I said, Brian, trust me. And Brian owns the Randy Rhoads book. And I said, trust me, if you think that thing looks good, just let him, give him all the pictures, give him the text, and stand back and watch what you get. And he is a savant, and he's a genius. And it looks like it does, and it's put together like it is put together. Really, he's the third cog in our wheel, honestly, and the props really go to him. Obviously Brian and I have the knowledge. Obviously we took the pictures. Obviously we wrote the text. But you can have all that if you don't have a great designer and graphic artist. You're missing a big piece of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
When we were trying to talk about you coming on the show, and I think I mentioned this briefly, but it was a funny thing that happened. We're trying to talk about this book, and there was this French dude that came up, and we were in the middle of a conversation. He just broke in. How much is the book? And Brian,
I remember
you were so patient with this guy. He did not understand.
No, I want
could
to
not buy
book.
it. Yeah, I don't care how much it is. How
He
much
was
is
trying to
it?
buy a prototype away from the NAMM show at the Marshall booth.
Yeah.
Right from under our nose, blatantly offering us stupid money for it, and he did not understand why he was refused.
Yeah, it was pretty. But that'll let you know. I mean, this is really special.
It's that good.
Well, here's one of the reasons. Let me just say this, Brian. I'll let you talk real quick. The prototypes have a soft cover. In the interest of getting it done in however many days we had to get it done, we couldn't get it. We couldn't have the hardcovers made. You just can't get. I think we put this whole thing together in under a week. You just can't get them that fast. There's too many processes that go into turning chipboard into a book cover. Yeah. So we had to, understand that it's soft cover. We don't want these soft cover books anywhere out in the universe because we are never, ever printing this book on soft cover. So that's one of the main reasons why we didn't sell the book to him for whatever the price would have been. We wouldn't have had a book to let all the other, thousands of people that wanted to look at the book had we have sold it to them. But moreover, we don't want a soft cover out in the world because that's not what we want. And we hadn't even finished editing the book. We had to sort of let go at some point and go, okay, we're going to make 6 of them. And, so if every I isn't dotted and T isn't crossed, we'll get it before we, run the 1,500 books. Mm-hmm. So that's really why we didn't want to let it go. But at the same time, there was a guy that came in, sat down on the couch, and he goes, how much for that one? And I said, they're not for sale. He goes, oh, yeah, they are. And I go, no, it's really not for sale. He goes, yeah, they are. How much?
And their arrogance.
And I just said, I said, I didn't bring them down here to sell them. And his wife looks at me and goes, oh, just sell it to him. And it's like, I look at Brian, and, I guess everything does have a price eventually. I can't die with hundreds of these, so there are going to be sold one day. But, maybe they'll end up, at Marshall, and they'll go back to their birthplace. I don't know. It was just funny. And I'm sorry, Brian, I interrupted you.
Oh, that's all right. I was going to tell the guys about elaborate a little more on the parts section in the back that I put together.
Right.
I took copious notes for decades. Whenever people would have stuff here to be worked on or restored, I would write down all the different appointments that were on it and serial numbers if they existed and what things were attached or not attached with. And I had pages and pages and pages and pages of all these notes and for different eras and years and so forth of cabinets. And over time, I was able to start putting them into order of when they were made production-wise and how things kind of fit together as they change things along the way. And one of the goals of me wanting to be involved in making a Marshall book was there was never anything produced or published in the world that spoke to identification of speaker cabinets. As Rob knows, there's lots of information out there on how to date your amplifier. That's pretty common knowledge and it's well published. But how do you tell if your speaker cabinet is a 1968, a 1969, or a 1971? There was never any information published on this. And so this is part of the reason I wanted to do all the parts identification and show the different changes along the way. And in the early years, the back of the Marshall cabinets, it doesn't have any information on them as to what they're loaded with at all. It just has a serial number and a stock number tag, if they still exist.
If you're lucky.
You truly don't know by looking at the cabinet physically on the outside. You can't tell if it has 25-watt Celestions or 30-watt Celestions. You can't tell without looking into the details, if those speakers have lead cones or base cones on them. And then you flash forward, the cabinets are 50 years old. How many owners have they had and how many times have things been changed? And so it's nice to put together a comprehensive thing in a book and show different dates and what cosmetic changes were happening so that, for example, if you went down to your local music store and the guy's got 2 or 3 cabinets and he says, well, this one's a 73 cabinet. Is it really a 73 cabinet? Is that the story the previous owner gave him? Is there any truth to that? Or is the cabinet actually 3 years newer? You don't know. And so that's why we do books in picture form as well as parts details. This book will end up being a Bible under the counter, hopefully, for all the vintage amp stores around the country. Somebody comes in and says, I've got such and such. You just go, hang on, wait a second. Let me open up the book to that particular year. And now does your particular piece of gear match any of the pictures of these particular items? It'll become...
So there was I'm sorry, Brian. I want to tell this story, which talks exactly to what he's saying. So there was a couple of times where I was in a music store, and there was a tag, and it said 1973, and I literally got Brian on FaceTime, and I said, he goes, open up the back, let me see, let me turn it around, let me see, nope, and how the hell do you know? And it's like, well, they didn't use this kind of staple on this bracing, and this thing should have. It's like, oh my God. But there have been many times where I have gone into stores because I'll see something, and I'm fairly knowledgeable now. If I wasn't at this point, there'd be something wrong with me just having lived with Brian for 40 years. But before I wrote the book or helped write the book or whatever. I just didn't know. And so I would get into a store and it would say, this is a 71. And he'd go, nope, it's not. And so that's part of the beauty about this book. Like he was saying, there's no hiding anything anymore.
It's definitive.
This is exactly what,
with the cabinet.
This is what you have. I just wanted to also tell one other quick story about NAMM, since you were bringing up the guy that insisted on the book. Something very cool happened for Brian and I at the literally the tail end of NAMM. And this guy walked into the booth, who Brian and I knew from years ago. And I literally said to him, oh shit. And it was Michael Doyle. And it was the guy that wrote The History of Marshall. And I literally thought, well, he doesn't know about the book. I haven't talked to him in years. And here we go. And Brian looks at me and goes, you're shaking. And it's like, well, here's the guy that basically wrote The History of Marshall, who's about to pick up our book. And, I don't know what he's going to do, and he looked at the book and he looked at us and he looked at the book and he looked at us and he just said, how the hell did you guys pull this off? And he goes, this thing is unbelievable.
Wow.
I wish my book looked like this. And
That's
then,
awesome.
I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if he was going to say, how dare you? Or, this is bullshit. But he was blown away. And Brian, is that fair?
Yeah, I would say he was overwhelmed at the very least. He was really shocked at the quality and was basically patting both of us on the back and saying, I know you've collected forever and you had this stuff, but this is stupendous.
That's fantastic.
Nice.
And that really mattered, to us, because if there's anybody that knows these amplifiers and cabinets, it's number one, this guy that worked there for years and was commissioned to write these books and did all the research and lived his life with these things. And for him to say, this is the Holy Grail, meant everything to us.
That's awesome.
So anyway, I just wanted to share that story.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna do a little thing here, but then right after we do that little thing, I just need to make. Actually, we'll just do that right now.
Are you
we
sure,
need to get
Todd?
people. Yes, you pipe down. Everybody needs to get over to the website called collectingloudhistory.com, and the great thing about getting in on this early is that these are going to be signed. The first 200 are signed, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you have something that's not only special, but it's extra special.
Extra special.
So make sure you take advantage of this offer that they have right now, because that just makes it so much cooler.
And let me say one thing about the website. So first of all, the website's designed by a girl named Kaylee Credit, and that is her real name. And she's a genius. And there is a flip book in this on the website. I think it's on one of the early pages, where you literally click on the arrows and you can flip through several pages of the book.
Yeah.
And then later there's a gallery with all these pictures of Marshalls where you click on the picture and it takes you to the picture, to the page of the actual book.
Yeah.
So you could really see what you're buying. You can see what this thing looks like, and it's incredible detail.
Yeah.
So, it's really worth spending some time on this website. She did a beautiful job designing it.
There you go.
Anyway, that's what I was going to say about the website.
All right. We got a little tiny thing here before we let you guys go. This is called
Would you rather?
We got to correct that. Come on.
No, everybody loves it.
Doesn't do
So this is a
justice.
little thing we do towards the end of the show. Would you rather? And Rob's got a special one for us this week.
Nobody knows what it is.
Okay.
All right, we'll try to keep this short and sweet. So to get this tied around the Marshall theme, sort of, you just joined a new band, an AC/DC cover band,
Huh.
and you're getting ready to play your first show in a week. But the amp you have is a new DSL 40, so it's not going to be loud enough for the stage. Can't play the Angus part with a DSL 40 combo. Do you buy
Okay.
a vintage mid-70s 100-watt super lead from Reverb somewhere on a store? The guy who's selling it says it's in great condition, works perfectly, but you don't actually know what it is. It may show up with some weird noises. It may not work. It may not sound all that great, as we were just talking about. Not all of them are the same. Or do you buy a brand new boutique build from a reputable builder that is a 1-to-1 clone copy?
Ooh, good
Mm-hmm.
question. All right.
Well,
Go ahead, Peter.
I can answer that. I can answer that both ways. Because I don't know that there's a right or wrong way. First of all, backing up for a second, there's essentially 3 amplifiers. There's a Marshall, there's a Fender, and a Vox. Everything else that's made is either one of those or some variation of those. If, you're a matchless, you're a Vox AC30. And if you're, a Bad Cat, you're something else. And, but they're all versions of those. Now, that said, the Friedman amps get really, really close to Marshall amps. I mean, really close, because here's a guy that worked on them, and some of his stuff is amazing. So when you say boutique amps, it would be a specific one for me, and it would have to be, the Friedman Plex that he made based on his 68, Plexi head. That one is just about as good as sounding as any Marshall that I have. So I would say if it's going to be a boutique amp, it would have to be one of his. Now, I, however, would go to Reverb and I would look very closely at this mid-70s head. And I would also say, well, do I want anything mid-73 and earlier, or do I want anything mid-73 and later? Because that's the turning point for 70s heads. There's a big difference between early 73 and late 73 and onwards, because that's when they ended the hand wiring, the hand soldering of the boards. And I also, knowing the amp tech that I do, who's here, I should probably give him props. His name is Roy Blankenship. He's another wizard.
Roy? Roy used to work in town here.
Roy's a dear friend of Brian and I.
Yeah, he worked at Able Audio for years.
And Roy is the only one who's had his hands on my stuff and Brian's stuff, literally for decades. And Roy has all the parts. And Roy's got all the mustard caps and all the right stuff. And knowing Roy and knowing that I can pick up the phone and say, I just got an amp, can I come down and be there in 20 minutes, at midnight, which is generally when he starts working, and that I had the ability to make something correct fast, I would say I would do the Reverb, get the Marshall, and if it's not right, I would have Roy make it right.
Yeah.
So that would be my first choice. If I had to go the other way, I would go with a Friedman head.
That's cheating, Peter. Just to let you know, that's cheating.
I know.
That was part of it. That
I know.
You're going to get it. Oh, let me change it up. You're going to get it as you go out on the stage. So.
Oh, and that's when it arrives?
That's when it arrives. It could arrive that late.
Yeah.
That changed.
That changes your answer.
I was going to have a
that changes
completely different answer to that question.
Well, go for it.
Well, I'm going to view it as a trick question because it's being framed to me as opposed to somebody else. And being I'm the caretaker of a couple of very large collections, given the circumstances that I need an AC/DC sounding head, I'm going to go to my friend Dave Amato, and I'm going to borrow his 1966 PA 100 watt that was formerly owned by Malcolm Young.
Oh, well, there you go.
Well,
Again, you're cheating.
and after,
Mere mortals can't do this.
hang on. And before Dave owned it, it came from my collection.
That's correct.
So,
it went kicked around to a couple of big stars before it.
And I bought it from Eric Johnson. So there you go. It's a great question.
Yeah,
It's a great question. I would say if you're gonna press me to an answer, and I have to pick one, I'm a diehard Marshall fan. I and as much as it can be dangerous buying one off a Reverb and hoping for the best. With respect to the brand, I would have to hope for the best.
There you go. Around our horn here, is anybody gonna not take the vintage Marshall?
Vintage.
Yeah.
I would actually go with a clone of something. With that, I need it
you're
for the
an
gig.
Amtech.
No. If I need it for the gig and what if I don't have time to get inside it? I unfortunately do not have the access that both Brian and Peter have here.
Yeah.
So I would have to
fair.
I would either have to fix the Marshall myself real quick before I get it on the stage, or deal with the clone copy, boutique, whatever. So
Yeah.
What about you, Todd?
I'm going to do the same thing because I've gotten a couple amps and then I'm like, ruh-roh, hey, Rob. So I've had to do that already
Can I
a
get
few
this
times.
by tomorrow night?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It would be awesome to do that, but especially if you don't even have a chance to play it live, that would be that'd be sketchy
Worrisome.
for me. Yeah. All right, Tony.
Yes.
We got to thank a few people.
That's right, Todd, because at this point of the show, there's a special group of people we like to thank. We love to thank. These are our executive producers. Now, an executive producer helps make this show possible. How do you become one? Easy as pie. Head over to patreon.com/the Guitar Knobs. Check out a couple different levels in which you can participate. Become a sponsor, a friend, a hero of the podcast. Each level comes with some very nice thank you gifts and opportunities to win great stuff. But in addition to all that, there's one thing more. What would that be? You get to have your name right on the thing. You don't have a button for that one?
He doesn't know which button it is. He doesn't know.
No, I don't have that one on here yet. I'm working on
Can
it.
you at least put that one on normal speed?
No.
Oh.
Come on.
Maybe.
That's right.
Disrespecting.
You get to have your name read on the thing, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So
I should have had Brian say that.
You could have.
Yeah. Well, let's go.
Now you think about
Yeah.
it.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Brian.
So, special thanks to these executive producers: Anthony Lathrop, Brett Hogarth, Cameron Pampas, Darren Gregory, Don Kloss, Elad Mizrahi, James Bell, James White, John Esterly from Rare Buzzer Effects, John Sebastian, John Halverson, Justin Jones, Ken Sayers, Michael Senchuk, Mike Davenport, Owen Eads, Plutone, Ralph Gottschalk from Wonderful Audio Technology. What? Richard Kendall, Rick Calhoun, Rusty Sneeden, Stefan Lamb, Tom Brazen, Trevor Ellenberg, Trevor Gunberg, Vader and Pedals, and Ty Barnes.
Oh, hooray.
That's right, Ty Barnes. Welcome aboard.
Yes.
But Todd, in addition to all those great people, there's another special group of executive producers.
Do tell.
Do you know what we call them?
I do, but you're going to tell me anyways.
That's right. They're called our Grand Poobahs. These are the creme de la creme, the top of the heap, the A number ones, and they wear a fez upon their head whilst chugging down orange Gatorade. Sugar-free, of course.
Yes. Or if you're in Scotland, Earn Brew.
Earn Brew.
I think. I'm listening to a lot of Ian Rankin author books right now anyways.
So special thanks to these Grand Poobahs. Anthony Gemolero, Billy Spitfire Unlimited, Bob Crouch, Brian Robison, Cody Foster, David Kaminga, David Tyndall, Enrico Fernando, Fox Hill Studio, Gregory Randall, Hex Matos, John Williams, Martin Cliff, Matt Hart, Michael Van Zant, Michio Murakishi, Mike Nazionale, Moon Guitars, Pedro Vasquez, Sam Jett, Steve Keys, James Pennington, Zach Oswald from Brown and Wow Pickups.
He's coming on the show. He promised.
Okay, I'll believe it when he's sitting in that chair right there.
Will he talk?
Yes, he will. And, of course, Jonathan Labate.
Yes.
From M2 Labs.
Yes. Man, that's a good dude, by the way, everybody. Get over to M2 Labs and get one of them there pedals. He's a really solid dude. He's been very thoughtful and kind in our communications and whatnot. All right. So we need to say a colossal thank you to Peter Margolis and Brian Ranks, who have created this incredible book, Collecting Loud History. And, there's still time. Got to go get some. Peter, where can people find either, the book or any other place you would like to direct people to go check out?
Well, currently, you can only get the book at collectingloudhistory.com, period. It's not available on Amazon. It's not available at the Guitar Center. It's not available at Barnes & Noble. That's not to say it won't be at some point, but Brian and I and Denny and Kaylee and Paul and Albert, our team has done this literally, from the ground up. We have no distributor. We have no publicist. We have nothing. It's the six of us that have put this thing together from scratch. So we have a website, collectingloudhistory.com. That is the only place that you can get this book. And down the road, when we're into the second or third pressing and it's flying off the shelves, then it will probably be available where your books are bought and sold. But for the moment, this is the only place you can get it.
Do you guys have a Instagram or anything where you're featuring any of this?
Yes. The Instagram, the Facebook page there's links on collectingloudhistory.com to both of those things.
Got it.
Haley runs our Instagram and our Facebook and our Collecting Loud History. And Brian and I are both 60-year-old dudes who know little or nothing about Instagram and Facebook. So I wish I could tell you what our handle was, but I know we have them. I know I've communicated with people on them, and they send me notes. And but I know that everything is done through our website.
Excellent. Brian, how about yourself? You want anywhere else you want to send people for any particular reason?
No, Peter elaborated on it perfectly there. We're only selling the book through our website at this time. Yep. And, we're very excited about it. Like you guys, we won't see it until it gets in our hands. When it gets delivered to us, the excitement is building rapidly for Peter and I, because we are looking forward to getting our hands on the finished product, just like all of our fans that love Marshall. So
yeah,
it's really an exciting time for us.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so very much. We really, truly appreciate it. It was great, and we wish you the greatest of successes with this. It's truly something special.
I think, and by the way, I think, and I can speak for Brian, you guys did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
And you asked great questions, and this was really easy and comfortable for us, and you never put us on the spot, and you didn't step on us, and I spend my entire life in, production. And I've worked on many, many talk shows, and, you could look up my IMDb page and you'll see this is what I do for a living. And you guys did a great job.
Wow.
So thank you.
I'm beaming. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. And
you're welcome.
Thank you guys.
You're welcome.
He's going to put that in like 3 places.
Oh, yeah. And on his resume.
Right, exactly.
Hey.
Probably stored over there.
Hey, if you're hiring for those.
Just saying, Peter. All right, Tony.
Yes?
Where can people find you?
Me? They can find me at pickguardian.com. Check out the things that I do. What do? I make pick guards for guitars. How do you get one? Shoot me an email. Let me know what you need, what you're trying to do, what pickups you need, what color you want, all the stuff. And I'll take very good care of you. You know, Todd,
Yeah.
it's your opportunity to make your guitar even more yours.
Exactament. Rob.
Mad Cow Amplification. Facebook, Instagram, and I have.
Is your Instagram working?
I've had access for like a month or 2 or 3 now.
Yeah.
But two things: I've kind of enjoyed not being tied to it.
Yeah.
And I've been so busy. But no, I am going to start posting on a regular basis again.
Good.
I miss the
need
posts.
I do too.
A lot of people, yeah. I get more messages when I don't post stuff, and that takes me time.
You
to
could do
post through.
a second, like you want
me to open up a sec? I can't even manage
open
one.
open up the alternate one that's just called Old Moan and Rob.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't moan as much as you complain. So
All right. Hey, you can shoot me a DM on Instagram at Guitar Knobs. We would love to hear from you. Tell us what you thought about this episode. Tell us what you think about other things. Tell us what you had for breakfast. I don't care. We just want to connect with you, doggone it.
How about Would You Rathers?
Those two. We need those. We got a whole bunch of good ones. Keep them coming, everybody. In the meantime, have a fantastic guitar week. Go get this book.
Yes.
Please. You're going to be sad if you don't.
Yes.
And subscribe!
In the caretaker large collections.
Excellent.
And it
excellent.
sounds like loud dogs, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did warn him yesterday that might happen.
No worries.
Yep,
I'm going
all
to go
good.
sit in another room.
We're all dog lovers here except for Todd.
Jeez.
Okay.
Great. Way to set me up for a fall. And then Rob Chafe is right here. And
Hi, Rob.
Hey, Rob.
Rob is Amp Tech to the Midwest Stars.
nobody.
Yeah, right.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, he's had a few Marshalls.
Yeah, Brian and I have had a few also.
Yeah, you might have all of them. Brian, how you doing?
Fabulous.
Excellent. It's like we just saw you 2 days ago, but not.
Yeah.
Yes. You heard what Jared said though, right?
I mean, he says lots of
With
things.
the Nazi and Ale and all that stuff at the end.
Oh yeah, I'm just gonna call him Mike.
just gonna call him Mike.
But best part was the pause before it.
I'm just gonna call him Mike. That was so gold.
Yeah.
It was so perfect.
If in the middle of this something happens like, one of us has to go pee or a doorbell rings.
Oh yeah, just
or
let us know. No
something,
big. Yeah, we edit this.
We can put a pause on
yeah.
for a second and okay, great.
But if you have to pee and the doorbell rings, we can't handle it.
Yes.
It's one or the other.
Okay.
That might be tough.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a fantastic guitar weekend. Subscribe. Well, wait a minute. We're
Dummy.
too early.
You're a dummy.
Hang on.
All right, well, just tell us when to hang up
Sounds good.
or to click escape or whatever.
And away we go.
Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/theguitarknobs. Visit our website at theguitarknobs.com for all of our past episodes, 4 on the Floor blog, and other good stuff. You can connect with us on social too at our Facebook page and share your gear and stories on our Facebook group. Also, be sure to check out our Instagram at Guitar Knobs. Catch you next time.